reduce inequality within and among countries. This is the challenge issued by SDG 10. Inequality within and among countries is a persistent cause for concern. Despite some positive signs towards reducing inequality, such as the reduction of relative income inequality in some countries, the promotion of women's rights and LGBTQ rights in some regions, or even the preferential trade agreements that favor lower-income nations, inequality still persists. COVID-19 has deepened existing inequalities, hitting the poorest and most vulnerable communities the hardest. It has put a spotlight on economic inequalities and fragile social safety nets that leave vulnerable communities to bear the brunt of the crisis. What changes are needed in order for us to reduce inequalities in a sustainable manner? And how are we so far in trying to achieve this? Hello science fans, my name is Chona and I'm your resident Filipina scientist. Join us in today's sustainability episode where we talk about Sustainable Development Goal 10, Reduced Inequalities. Children in the poorest 20% of the populations are still up to 3 times more likely to die before their 5th birthday than children in the richer countries. Social protection has been significantly extended globally, and yet persons with disabilities are still 5 times more likely to incur catastrophic health-related expenses. And this impacts more people than you think, as 1 in 10 children is a child with a disability. Only 28% of persons with significant disabilities have access to disability benefits globally. And worse, only 1% in low-income countries. From 2000 to 2017, the global maternal mortality ratio declined by 38%, from 342 deaths to 211 deaths per 100,000 live births. But women in rural areas are still 3 times more likely to die while giving birth compared to women living in urban centers. And please note that up to 30% of income inequality is due to inequality within households, including between women and men. Women are also more likely than men to live below 50% of the median income. Global trends show that a lot of work still needs to be done to reduce inequality. But what about the Philippines? Child mortality rate of the Philippines fell gradually from 83.8 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1970 to 27.3 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2019. Of the 92.1 million households in the Philippines, 1.44 million people, or about 1.57%, have disabilities. Our maternal mortality rate remains high at 160 deaths per 100,000 live births against a goal of 55 to 60 deaths per 100,000 live births. The distribution of wealth is also uneven in the Philippines, with the poorest 20% earning on average just 14,022 pesos a month, while the richest 20% earns on average more than 176,000 pesos a month. To reduce inequalities significantly, SDG 10 has several key indicators. In this video, we will focus on how the Philippines has tried to address these challenges. The first challenge is to progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. In 2015 to 2018, the average incomes of households at the bottom 40% grew at an annualized rate of 6.4%, which was 3 percentage points faster compared to the average income of all households in the Philippines. The COVID-19 pandemic may have resulted in the national poverty rate increasing from 16.7% in 2018 to an estimated 21% in 2020, even after accounting for the effects of government subsidies. The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, expects that the country's poverty rate will be halved by the end of June 2022. NEDA attributed the decline in poverty to inclusive job-generating growth and better targeted programs that helped increase the incomes of the poor, which showed in how the bottom 30% of the population's mean per capita income increased by 31.9%, outpacing the income growth of those in the top 20% of households. But this doesn't mean that the government can rest. The government must continue to generate more quality jobs, find ways to increase the income of the poor, reduce the vulnerability of the poor through social programs and increasing financial literacy, and the intensified implementation on the National Program on Population and Family Planning. Another challenge issued by SDG 10 is to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status. Given all the complexities of the roots of inequality, one way to combat this is through education, such as, for example, the provision of high-quality education for children with disabilities. Inclusive education is a learning environment where children with and without disabilities are taught together as equals. And the law mandating all schools to provide high-quality, inclusive education to children with disabilities, or Republic Act 11560, was signed into law just this March of 2022. In the Philippines, indigenous peoples have been subject to historical discrimination and marginalization from political processes and economic benefit. In the Philippines, various local and international organizations work with indigenous communities to help them advocate for their needs and to help watch out for the proper implementation of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Indigenous peoples face intimidating challenges from loss of ancestral lands, displacement, pressures to and destruction of traditional ways of life and practices, and loss of identity and culture. Indigenous peoples play a vital role as custodians and protectors of the environment, and they possess amazing traditional knowledge that can help us achieve our sustainable development goals. Another aspect of SDG 10 is to ensure equal opportunity and reduce inequalities of income, including by eliminating discriminatory laws, policies, and practices, and promoting appropriate legislation, policies, and action in this regard. One of the projects to help address this was the TRAIN Law. The TRAIN Act is aimed to generate revenue to eradicate extreme poverty, to create inclusive institutions that will offer equal opportunities to all, and to achieve higher income country status. In terms of implementation, 9.2 million out of the target 10 million households have already received their cash transfer benefits care of the TRAIN Law. But there are analyses that showed that the TRAIN Law actually increased incidences of poverty in the Philippines due to the increased cost of commodities. SDG 10 also calls on global systems to improve the regulation and monitoring of global financial markets and institutions and strengthen the implementation of such regulations. But does the Philippines have a role in global economics? The economy of the Philippines is the world's 34th largest economy by nominal GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund of 2021, and the 12th largest economy in Asia, and the third largest economy in the ASEAN after Indonesia and Thailand. And so, at a global scale, financial markets will help us direct the flow of our investments and savings within our own economy in order for us to help increase capital and also direct the productions of our goods and services. SDG 10 also asks the international community to ensure enhanced representation and voice for developing countries in decision-making in global international economic and financial institutions in order to deliver more effective, credible, accountable, and legitimate institutions. In terms of international financial institutions, one of our longest partners would be the World Bank, which helps fund the Philippines' development projects and programs. The World Bank is an international organization that attempts to fight poverty by offering developmental assistance to middle and low-income countries. Since 1945, the World Bank Group has supported the Philippines' efforts to alleviate poverty, upgrade infrastructure, improve health, nutrition, and education, strengthen resilience against climate change and natural disasters, promote peace, and enhance global competitiveness. And finally, SDG 10 calls upon us to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. When we hear migration in the Philippines, it's almost always about moving out of the country or working somewhere else outside of the Philippines. Traditionally, the foreign population in the Philippines consists of people of Chinese origin, with some 80% of overseas Chinese are in Southeast Asia, and some people of Indian origin who came to settle in the country years ago. Presently, there are about 36,150 foreign nationals working and living within the country, and we are in the process of adapting our policies so that we can serve as hosts to more nationalities who want to live and work here in the Philippines. But how can STEM help reduce inequality in the Philippines and in the world? The STEM community has been active in creating innovations that help improve the mobility and increase the access to information of persons with disabilities. The Women in STEM movement that calls for greater gender representation in male-dominated fields is also getting more traction. With greater representation across the gender spectrum within STEM, we can unlock a potential diversity of information that would lead to greater innovations. And with issues in security for migration, STEM also provides technologies that allow for more efficient transitions of migrating individuals and to provide them access to the social security services available for them. And so science has spoken, and science will continue to speak. And in order for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we have to try and listen. But what do you think? What science innovations are needed in order to help achieve SDG 10? How can scientists and engineers collaborate with other sectors of society in order to reduce inequality? I hope you can share your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section below. And to keep updated with the latest videos from SHE-ensya, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Follow me also on Instagram at shona.abeledo. Thank you so much for joining us in today's sustainability episode, and I hope to see you around!